A lot of people think of Russia and the United States as being on opposite sides of the world, with Russia dominating Eastern Europe and Northeast Asia, and the United States being the big daddy of the West. Despite crack flat earth theories, the world is very much a globe, and Russia and one of the biggest states in America are neighbors with the ability to look one another in the eye over a very small stretch of ocean. What if Russia decided to traverse those icy waters and kick down Alaska's front door? Hello and welcome back to Life's Biggest Questions. I'm your host Rebecca Felgate, and today we're asking, what if Russia invaded Alaska? Before we torpedo into this video, I just want to ask you guys to hit that thumbs up button and also let me know what you think would happen if the United States and Russia got into a row. Yeesh. Suffice to say, nobody thinks it's going to be pretty. Okay, so Russia and Alaska are divided by the Bering Strait, which is 55 miles wide at its narrowest point, meaning the United States and Russian lands are just about visible to one another from the shores of the mainland. In the middle of the strait sits the island of Diomede and Big Diomede. The smaller of the island, Diomede, is the United States territory, and the Big Diomede is Russian land. Just 2 miles of water separate these two islands, and in the winter, hikers can even walk from one to the other. While the proximity is one thing, it is not as if Alaska is right next door to the heart of the Kremlin. The neighboring land is in a far-flung remote area of Siberia. If Russia were to start mobilizing their troops to the far east of their territory, the Americans would probably notice and likely be ready to defend an attack. When we say invade, it is very unlikely that Russia would or could annex Alaska like they did Crimea. They know that they simply couldn't capture the land, so I highly doubt that they would send over any of their active army of 1 million troops. They couldn't send over any of their 20,000 tanks either, but they could utilize their 3,800 rocket projectors and their air strength of 3,900 aircraft. But again, these days not a lot can happen without the states knowing. It just depends if the United States could mobilize its defenses faster than the Russians could get theirs to Siberia. Of course, if Russia sent any kind of missile to Alaska, the United States would respond quickly and decisively. The worst Russia could throw at Alaska would be a nuclear missile, which, depending on which of the 7,000 in their arsenal they chose, could obliterate much of the state and definitely could destroy Anchorage and harm many of its population of 298,000. But why? What would be the point? Not only does Alaska have missile defenses in place, this act of aggression would undoubtedly spark hot war between two countries embittered in a Cold War for much of their modern history. We know from previous episodes of Life's Biggest Questions that the United States and Russia both have the ability to destroy one another. In fact, we have heard Trump boast about his big red button on several occasions, and we've heard that Vladimir Putin thinks that he could destroy the states in minutes. This mutually assured destruction would be the worst case scenario to come from an Alaskan invasion, and honestly, even if nukes weren't involved, encroaching on North American soil would likely lead to World War III. Canada, who of course share a border with Alaska and the rest of the United States, would be the first to join the fray, and of course Great Britain would be there with their buds across the pond without the need of the permission from the EU. The EU of course would hope for a peaceful resolution, but if push came to shove, they would of course back the United States. Interestingly, this would mean Russia would be surrounded by enemies to the east and the west, which is never a good situation to be in. China would also look for a peaceful resolution and would perhaps try to stay out of the fray, possibly secretly pleased that its two main competitors were too focused on distracting one another and destroying one another to actually vie for economic dominance. Even if we took nukes out of the question, warfare is not the same these days. 100 years ago, Russia maybe could have talked their way into Cuban land, tried to grab Hawaii, skirted sneakily through Canada and surrounded the United States, but these days aerial surveillance has stopped the element of surprise needed to pull off that kind of land attack, and aerial attacks mean that land strategy is no longer a valid war winner anyway. So what if Russia invaded Alaska? It would be a huge, messy, costly mistake that at best would spark decades of suffering and at worst would destroy swathes of the modern world as we know it. I will end by saying this. The Russians made a huge military mistake in 1867 when Tsar Alexander II sold Alaska to the United States for just $7.2 million. If Russia still owned that land today, the geopolitical landscape as we know it would be very very different. So that is one question answered for you. What do you think would happen if Russia invaded Alaska? What should we talk about in our next episode of Life's Biggest Questions? Let me know in the comments section down below. Also, while you're there, why don't you hit that thumbs up button? And if you haven't yet clicked on the notification bell, please do so to be the first to hear the next biggest answer. I'm your host, Rebecca Felgate. I'll catch you in the next video, but until then, stay curious, stay alert, and never ever stop questioning.